Welcome to the Human Meme Podcast. I'm David Bowles, and today we have a new Bowles Books fractional fiction novel to share with you today about the body's archive. The Inheritance. Your grandmother was frightened before you were born. Not in the ordinary way that people are frightened, the startle at a loud noise or the anxiety before a difficult conversation. I mean something more precise. Decades before your parents met, before you existed as even a possibility, your grandmother experienced something that changed her at the molecular level. Methyl groups attached themselves to specific locations on her DNA. Genes that had been active went quiet. Genes that had been quiet began to speak. And that alteration, that chemical annotation of experience passed forward. You carry it now. This is not metaphor. This is not poetry. This is peer-reviewed science published in journals like Biological Psychiatry and Nature Neuroscience. The field is called transgenerational epigenetics, and it has upended everything we thought we knew about inheritance. For most of the 20th century, biology taught us that acquired characteristics cannot be inherited. Lamarck was wrong. The giraffe that stretches its neck does not produce offspring with longer necks. What you experience in your lifetime dies with you. Only the genetic code itself, that sequence of base pairs you were born with, passes to your children. Except that turns out to be incomplete. The genetic code is not the whole story. There is another layer, a system of chemical markers that determines which genes are expressed and which remain silent. Think of it this way. If DNA is a vast library, epigenetics is the card catalog that determines which books get read. The books themselves do not change, but the catalog can be rewritten. And when it is rewritten by trauma, by famine, by sustained stress, that new catalog can be inherited. Rachel Yehuda at Mount Sinai studied the children of Holocaust survivors. She found altered cortisol profiles, changed stress responses, specific epigenetic markers that distinguished these children from matched controls whose parents had not experienced the camps. The trauma had written itself into biology and passed forward to people who had never experienced it directly. Brian Diaz at Emory trained mice to fear a specific scent by pairing it with electric shock. Their offspring, who had never been shocked, showed heightened startle responses to that same scent. Their grandchildren did too. 3 generations carried a fear that only one generation had learned. This is what the body remembers that the mind forgets. I have been thinking about this research for years, and I kept returning to the same question. If trauma can be inherited biologically, what does that mean for the stories we tell about families? Literature has always been obsessed with inheritance. Shakespeare built Hamlet around a son's obligation to a dead father. Ibsen's Ghosts traced how a father's sins manifest in his son's flesh. O'Neill's Desire Under the Elms made a farm into contested territory where land and blood and transgression become inextricable. These playwrights understood something that science is only now confirming. The past does not stay past. It writes itself into the present through channels we cannot see. But those plays were written before epigenetics. They understood the phenomenon without understanding the mechanism. Mrs. Alving in Ghosts watches her son develop his father's disease and calls it the sins of the fathers visiting the children. She was speaking morally. We now know she was also speaking biologically. What happens when you take those dramatic structures, those plays that have survived centuries because they asked questions that remain unanswered, and fuse them with contemporary scientific understanding. That question became a book. The Inheritance is the second novel in a series I call fractional fiction. The method is deliberate. Take public domain source texts, identify their enduring dramatic architecture, and rebuild them through the lens of modern knowledge, not adaptation, not modernization, transformation. The Inheritance draws on all three plays I mentioned: Hamlet, Ghosts, and Desire Under the Elms. The protagonist is an epigeneticist named Anna Osborne, who studies transgenerational trauma in laboratory mice. She has built her career on maintaining scientific distance from the questions that haunt her own family. Then her mother dies, leaving behind a farmhouse in Nebraska, a confession recorded in the final hours of morphine clarity, and evidence that the methylation patterns Anna studies professionally exist in her own cells. The novel braids 3 timelines across 4 generations. The past reveals the original catastrophe, suicide, cold marriages, forbidden desire, and a death under circumstances that remain permanently ambiguous. The middle timeline shows how one woman tried to protect her daughter through silence, believing that what is not spoken cannot harm. The present follows Anna's investigation as she discovers that silence itself became the inheritance, that protection and poison were the same thing. The 3 source plays all agree on one point: the past determines the present, and escape is impossible. The ghost demands vengeance. Mrs. Alving cannot outrun her husband's disease. Eben and Abby destroy themselves because they cannot stop wanting what they should not have. Classical tragedy does not believe in freedom. The science complicates that certainty. The mouse studies show not only that trauma can be inherited, but that its effects may be reversible. Environmental enrichment, sustained care, breaking the cycle of stress can attenuate the epigenetic marks. The inheritance is real, it is measurable, it shapes who we are before we are born. And yet, it may not be destiny. Anna is pregnant by the novel's end. The question of what she will tell her child and whether the telling itself might begin to break the chain remains open. The tragic sources would close that door. The science leaves it ajar. The novel holds both possibilities without resolving the tension between them. I think that tension is where we actually live. We carry what our ancestors gave us. We did not choose it. We cannot simply decide to be free of it. But we are not condemned to repeat it either. The inheritance is real, and the inheritance can be addressed. What the body remembers, the mind can learn to understand. What was passed in silence can be spoken. The wound remains faithful, but perhaps the chain can break. That uncertainty is not a weakness. It is the point. The Inheritance is available now through Amazon and as a free PDF at David Bowles Books. It is the second novel in the fractional fiction series, following The Dying Grove, which fuse James Joyce's Dubliners with mycorrhizal network research to explore a different kind of distributed consciousness. Each book in the series stands alone. You do not need to read one to understand another. What connects them is method, classic literature, plus contemporary research, plus structural framework, equals original narrative. The questions that haunted Shakespeare and Ibsen and O'Neill still haunt us. The answers might be different, now that we understand more about how inheritance actually works. Your grandmother was frightened before you were born. You carry traces of that fear in your cells The question is not whether you inherited it. The question is what you will do with the knowledge. For the Human Meme Podcast, I'm David Bowles, wishing you a good evening and a better tomorrow. Be a human meme.